So this is the article of 14 September Indian Express written by Ram Madhav titled The UN World Needs. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will travel to New York later this month to address the special global summit hosted by the United Nations on September 2023, ambitiously named the UN Summit of the Future. The summit intends to forge a new international consensus on how to deliver a better present and safeguard the future. The summit intends to forge a new international consensus on how to deliver a better present and safeguard the future. It is no doubt a laudable theme, especially because the world today stands at a major inflection point and is passing through disruptive times. However, a bigger issue bothering many is the future of the UN itself. Started 8 decades ago in San Francisco with an initial membership of 50 countries, the organization looks weary today. It comes out as an ineffective and inefficient instrument in tackling contemporary challenges. The United Nations was not created in order to bring us to heaven, but in order to save us from hell. The United Nations was not created in order to bring us to heaven, but in order to save us from hell. Dag Hammarskjöld, the Swedish diplomat who served as the Secretary General from 1953 to 61, once said, "Unfortunately, it is struggling to keep up that role in face of growing geopolitical tensions, wars, and competing national interests. There is a growing realization about this situation within the UN itself, prompting Denis Francis uh, to choose rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity as the theme of 78th session held in September 2023. Addressing that special session, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed the need for reforming and modernizing the multilateral system that dates back to the Second World War. It is reform or rupture. The world was changed, our institutions have not, he told world leaders. To understand what ails the multilateral institution, one must go back to the dominant thought process of the early 20th century in the West. Western intellectuals like H.G. Wells, Albert Einstein, Aldous Huxley, and John Foster were primarily influenced by the idea of superiority of the Anglo Saxon ethnic identity. They were influenced by the idea of superiority of the Anglo Saxon ethnic identity and argued for a world union commanded by the US and other English speaking nations. In one of his earliest bestsellers, Anticipations, well prophesied about the emergence of a world state in which the English speaking people assumed a central role in the world state to come. Wells' prediction was that by the year Wells' prediction was that by the year 2000, the English-speaking people would constitute a federal state with its headquarters in the U.S., which will govern all the non-white states of the present British Empire, and in addition, much of the South and Middle Pacific, and East and West Indies, the rest of America, and the larger part of Black Africa. In 1935, he argued that common sense of the world demands that the English speaking community should get together on the issue of world peace, and that means a common foreign policy. It was this dominant idea which propelled Roosevelt and Churchill to lay the foundations for the UN in 1941. It should not be forgotten that a majority of the first 50 countries that had signed up for the UN in 1945 were from the sphere described by Wells in 1935. Over the years, the UN membership expanded and today it boasts of 193 member states and 2 observer states, Holy See and Palestine. Yet, the mindset continued in different forms. Sometimes it was called liberal internationalism, and at other times a concert of democracies. Brexit to AUKUS to the less talked Kanjak are all results of this mindset only. This complex of ethnic domination became the nemesis of the UN. As the non English speaking countries rose in power and influence and started asserting themselves in world affairs, the dominant powers found a way to bypass the institution rather than making it more democratic and representative. as the non-English speaking countries rose in power and influence and started asserting themselves in world affairs. The dominant powers found a way to bypass the institution rather than making it more democratic and representative. In his address to the General Assembly in 2023, President Joe Biden talked at length about economic and climate issues, turning to Ukraine war very briefly towards the end of his address. The world body looks helpless in containing wars in Ukraine and Gaza, in imposing rules on developed global north over issues of food security and other sustainable development goals, in the developing global south and in forcing the industrialized north to compensate for climate compliance by the developing south. The seriousness of the paralysis in the UN system is evident from the fact that the WTO's dispute redressal mechanism has come to a grinding halt since December 2019 due to the refusal of the US to ratify the appointment of new judges to the appellate body. As of 2023, more than 600 bilateral and regional trade agreements languish before the trade body without any resolution. India's permanent representatives to the UN, Ruchira Kamboj, summed up the crisis aptly at the plenary session of the General Assembly in February that marked 2 years of hostilities in Ukraine. As the conflict has continued for 2 years unabated, we, the Committee of UN Member States, must pause and ask ourselves two pressing questions. Are we anywhere near a possible acceptable solution? And if not, why is it that the UN system, particularly its principal organ, the United Nations Security Council, rendered completely ineffective? Why is it that UNSC rendered completely ineffective in its resolution of the ongoing conflict? Earlier, Jaishankar diagnosed the problem correctly. If you are going to ask five countries saying, would you mind changing the rules that you would have less power? Guess what the answer is going to be? If they are voiced, the answer would be something else. While the August body wants to talk about the future of the world, PM Modi may also talk about the future of UN itself and the need for countries like India to have a greater voice and say in its